Here are the top 10
dirty tricks to do in a sword fight
from history. Number 1.
Have your arms ever gotten tired while fencing?
No.
Shut up, I'm trying to make a point here. Not all of us have body dysmorphia and live at the gym. Michael Hunt says that if you're too tired to hold your sword up and keep fencing, there's an easy solution. You can just throw your sword and run away. Oh. But the question is, will this actually work?
Yes.
We've actually done experiments like this before, and we found throwing a sword to be surprisingly effective.
One of the things that you have to consider is that it's a big, sharp, pointy thing coming at you, and as the defender, you don't want to get hit with that. So you're probably going to back up or retreat, and that gives you the time you need to run away, which is the goal.
Throwing your sword is more of a last-ditch effort.
You're not trying to defeat your opponent, you're just trying to buy enough time to get away. It's not really that difficult to parry or move out of the way of a sword being thrown at you. It might catch your opponent by surprise, but realistically, you're buying time. Like, really trying to hit me. Try it again. That did get me. Right?
Even if you hit your opponent, it's probably not gonna stop them, and now you're unarmed.
Really, this exists just to buy time.
Number 2.
This next dirty trick comes from Fiore. Back in Fiore's day, the longswords were a lot shorter, and this meant they worked a little bit differently. Oftentimes, 2 people would hit, and they would come up to this higher position. This position can be good, there's a lot of stuff you can do from here, but it can also be dangerous. If I try and leave this to cut, my opponent can come down on me, and if I try and take advantage of his structure and wrestle him, now it's skill versus skill, so I better hope that I'm more skilled.
But why be skilled at swordsmanship when you can just use a dirty trick instead?
So what Fiore says to do instead is once you come to this position, just go ahead and kick him in the balls.
Mother trucker, dude.
This breaks their structure, and now you can do whatever you want to.
Is this revenge?
Yes. Fiore says that he does this to cause pain and to break his opponent's cover. This position here is pretty structured. I can't just blow through it. There's other things I can do, but if I do want to hit him in the head, I've got to cause him to weaken here. And if I collapse him there, now this is very open.
But the question is, would this work in combat?
Let's find out.
Wait. We know that kicking people in the balls works. It's a time-honored technique. We don't need to test it, please.
All right, you get away this time. Number 3. The next dirty trick comes from LeCoultre. He says, just throw your opponent in a bag. Get your buddies to come around. And then when your buddies get here, just put them in a bag. And then have your buddy take him away. But would this really work?
Well, we kind of cheated.
The play isn't actually about putting the opponent in the bag, it's more to show the effectiveness of the grapple that happens before it.
What LeCoultre is actually saying here is this grapple is so good that once you do it, you can make them do anything, like play a game of backgammon or make them crawl into a bag.
Are you just gonna stay in there now?
I mean, I can't get out.
A few moments later.
Number 4. This next one comes once again from our old friend Michael Hunt.
He was such a rascal.
This is the old, what's that over there?
Huh?
Michael Hunt says if you want to do a dirty trick, just say this. I will fight you, but I won't fight the guy behind you.
What?
And then when he's turned, stab them.
What a dirty trick.
It's that easy. But the question is, would this work in a real fight?
Yes, absolutely. I have a story about one of my friends who was at a tournament fencing someone and they went, what's that over there? And they looked!
And he stabbed him and got the point.
So yes, people are gullible.
You wouldn't think it would work, but it's surprisingly effective.
Number 5.
This next dirty trick comes from Miyamoto Musashi.
He loved dirty tricks. In fact, it's kind of what he was known for.
He had a lot of dirty tricks, but one of his favorites was showing up late.
In Japan back in the day, duels were very formal. You'd have to get permission from a local lord, you'd sign some stuff, and then you'd agree on a time and a place. You don't have to know a lot about Japan or its culture to know that they value respect and punctuality a lot.
And Musashi wasn't just a little late, he was hours late. His opponent had been standing there waiting for hours.
This made them a little bit upset.
Probably the most famous example was his duel against Sasaki Kojiro. After waiting for hours, when Musashi finally showed up, Kojiro just recklessly rushed him, which let Musashi beat him to death with a sword he carved from a boat oar on the journey over.
And he didn't just do this once, he did this like 3 different times.
So it's a great story, but is it practical?
Actually, yes. Making your opponent mad or emotional is a great way to throw them off of their game, and this can mean you can exploit them. Number 6. Our next dirty trick comes from our boy Fiore.
He skipped straight to literal war crimes.
Fiore talks about how he had a special pole hammer of his own invention that had a corrosive blinding powder at the top. And when you're fighting your opponent, you would use it and blind them. And then you would take out your sword and finish them off.
Now, we said this was about sword fights, but Fiore specifically talks about how his special weapon would only be good for one hit and it'd break. So afterwards, you would draw your sword.
And that makes it a sword fight, so don't come after us in the comments. So now that we've established this is definitely about sword fighting, would this be effective?
Yes! It's a literal war crime! This basically using pepper spray.
We've been using chemical irritants for a long time. There's lots of documentary research that show they work.
If you really want to know if it works, go get some pepper spray and spray it in your face.
For legal reasons, that's a joke. Number 7. The next dirty trick comes from William Shakespeare.
Good old Willie Shakes.
In Hamlet, Laertes and Hamlet are having a friendly fencing match, but Laertes is using a sword that is tipped with poison. During the match, Hamlet takes a wound from his opponent's sword, but then they get into a scuffle and the swords get swapped. Hamlet now has the poisoned sword and proceeds to wound Laertes as well.
The scene goes on, and basically through a series of nonsense, everybody dies of poison.
A poisoned sword is a common trope. It's a dirty trick that shows up in a lot of fantasy, but is it realistic?
Yes, but also no. Historically, poison blades weren't actually all that common.
There are a number of different examples of arrowheads being either poisoned or coated with things that would cause disease and infection.
The problem with poisoning a sword or a dagger is that the amount you'd have to stab them to get enough of the poison into their system to do anything, they'd probably die from the stab wound before the poison even took effect.
Turns out swords are really good at killing and they don't need any help.
Number 8. This next dirty trick comes from our good old boy Miyamoto Musashi.
Who apparently didn't know how to tell time.
We already talked about how he liked to show up late, but in this one he actually shows up early.
This time the story goes that Musashi is pissed off this clan leader so much that he and 100 of his guys show up to teach Musashi a lesson.
But what they don't know is Musashi got there early and hid behind a tree.
When the clan leader showed up with all of his men, Musashi jumped out from behind a tree and said,
"Did I keep you waiting?" And he killed him with a single blow.
"But is this realistic?"
Well, yeah, ambushes have been one of the most effective things you can do since always.
It's really easy to beat someone in a fight if they don't know they're in a fight yet. Number 9. The next dirty trick comes from our favorite rascal, Michael Hunt, who says, just bring a gun.
Michael Hunt talks about how learning rapier and dagger is hard.
Most people today don't want to take the time to learn how to use a rapier and a dagger. And in other countries, rapier and pistol is becoming more common. So oftentimes people will just bring a pistol to a duel.
So Michael Hunt says you should be prepared.
Michael Hunt says that because the other person's probably gonna bring a gun, you should bring one yourself. And just to be sure, you should shoot them first.
So, will this actually work in real life?
I mean, yeah.
It's a gun!
Now there is a caveat here because the guns of today would be super effective, but back in the day, guns weren't nearly as good. They were mostly single shot, they didn't have rifling, they weren't that accurate. So having a gun doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna be able to hit your opponent with it, but I mean, boomstick good.
Boomstick good.
Number 10. So to end this video rightly,
we have to talk about ending your opponent rightly.
This is your fault, Skull. This next dirty trick comes from the Gladiatoria.
It features 2 fully armored opponents, and it says to unscrew your pommel and throw it at them.
Jesus!
After that, you can rush in with your sword and kill them.
That scared me.
But is this realistic?
No! What? There's a couple of problems here. Machine screws weren't invented yet. You might be able to get a custom sword that's screwed on and screwed off, but realistically at that time, swords were more often peened than they were screw-on.
And even if you did have a threaded pommel, it's not really a quick process. All right, okay, I'm gonna throw this. Ah! That took a long time.
You'd have to have a really patient opponent to let you do this.
There's also the issue of once you've unscrewed your pommel, you might not want to use the sword anymore.
Now, some swords were fitted tighter than that. I have a sword that's lost its pommel and I can still fight with it a little bit, but I don't know.
Well, there's gotta be a better way.
I will say, I was fencing once and my pommel broke off, and then I thought about throwing it at my opponent, but I didn't purposefully unscrew it. This has been the top 10 dirty tricks to do in a sword fight.
Next time you're in a sword fight, try them out and let us know how it goes.
For legal reasons, that's a joke. If you want to get into sword fighting, go check out sellswordarts.com, where we've got links to different gear that you can buy and training that you can take.
And if you want to show your support, check out our Patreon.
See you on the next one. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider supporting the channel for as low as $1 a month on Patreon. This is all of our full-time jobs. We work really hard at it, and if you want to help us keep doing that, please consider joining.